You are pinned to your seat. The metal around you is vibrating so violently it feels like it might tear apart. And as your aircraft roars past an enemy heavy bomber, the massive plane looks like it's just standing still in the air. It is November 2nd, 1944. Up in the blue sky and bright sunshine, an endless line of 2,000 Allied aircraft, 900 bombers and 1,100 escorts, are flying in tight formations straight toward German fuel plants. Down on the runway at the Brandis airfield, the Luftwaffe unleashes a desperate, highly classified countermeasure. This is the Me-163 Komet. It is the only rocket-powered aircraft to ever see combat. Pitted against an armada of 2,000 heavily armed planes, conventional defense was no longer an option. The sheer, overwhelming math of the Allied bombing weights forced Germany to put their pilots into raw, highly experimental technology to try and reclaim the sky. Inside one of these Komets is Lieutenant Günther Andreas. As he pulls back on the stick, an intense G-force crushes him into his seat, rocketing him almost vertically through the cloud layer. The acceleration is staggering. His airspeed indicator shoots past 400 miles per hour, rapidly climbing towards 600. At this exact moment, he is flying the fastest plane in the world. This chart shows the massive acceleration curve of the Me-163 against its fuel supply. To achieve this kind of unmatched speed, the rocket engine violently consumes its chemical propellant. It burns through its entire capacity in a matter of minutes. As the fuel gauge bottoms out, you can see the immediate tactical problem. Simply reaching combat altitude nearly empties the tank. To preserve enough fuel to actually make an attack run, Andreas has to switch his engine to idle and level out. The Komet gave its pilots absolute, terrifying speed, but chained that power to a violently short countdown clock. Andreas and his wingman spot the bomber formation and push into a high-speed dive. The incredible velocity means Andreas has a firing window of only a handful of seconds to line up his crosshairs and pull the trigger. His twin 30mm cannons roar, unleashing a lightning volley of shells. The massive rounds easily shred the heavy metal of the flying fortress, peppering the wing and exposing the machinery inside. But it isn't a fatal blow. The bomber keeps flying. Needing to do more damage, Andreas turns back. He positions himself directly underneath the massive figures of the bombers and pushes his throttle to maximum, using the absolute last reserves of his fuel to attack from their exposed belly. As Andreas closes in from below, the ball turret gunner on the B-17's underside spots the ascent. He swiftly rotates his twin machine guns to meet the Komet's exact flight path. The Komet was built to outrun anything in the air, but moving in a straight line at an enemy target meant it still had to fly directly into the interlocking 360-degree crossfire of a flying Fortress. The two men trade fire until the American finds his mark. A .50 caliber bullet strikes the Komet, shattering the canopy and sending shrapnel directly into Andreas's face, just above his left eye. The rest of the heavy bullet punches completely through the metal plate behind his seat and tears straight into the aircraft's fuel tank. The Me-163 runs on a highly reactive chemical mixture. It is notorious for spontaneously exploding on impact and melting the skin off unfortunate pilots caught in a leak. Andreas tries to dive away. He reaches up to unlatch the canopy to bail out, but it doesn't budge. The immense pressure of the airstream rushing over the diving plane is holding the glass completely shut, and he is no longer alone. Following the contrails of the wounded Komet, the commanding officer of the 336th Squadron, Captain Fred Glover, slides his P-51 Mustang right onto Andreas's tail. Andreas pushes the throttle to full, but his fuel is gone. Glover holds the trigger down, raining a fire hose of .5 caliber lead that peels entire metal panels off the small rocket ship. The incoming tracer fire ignites the leaking chemical vapors, and flames engulf the Komet's underside. In a matter of seconds, the fastest interceptor on Earth has been reduced to an unpowered, burning metal coffin. Stripped of its speed, the experimental Komet is now entirely at the mercy of a conventional propeller fighter. Trapped in a burning aircraft, Andreas realizes his only way out requires a massive gamble. He grabs the controls and pulls hard on the stick, violently wrenching the little plane out of its dive. By sharply pulling up, he rapidly bleeds off his extreme velocity. He is deliberately killing his kinetic energy to remove the massive aerodynamic wind pressure that has been locking his canopy shut. He pushes against the glass one last time and it easily swings open. Andreas bails out into the sky, his parachute opening just as the volatile chemicals inside his fighter finally consume it. But as he drifts down, he watches his wingman, Jakob Bolenrath, fighting his own desperate battle. Bolenrath is locked in a high-speed dive, trying to shake a different P-51 Mustang right on his heels. In an experimental aircraft, the difference between escaping a fire and burning alive comes down to a split-second manipulation of aerodynamic physics. As Andreas drifts toward the ground, Bolenrath is still trapped in his lethal dive. Bolenrath looks over his shoulder at the American fighter, piloted by Louis Norley. Knowing his unpowered glider can outrun the Mustang in a straight dive, he pulls hard to the left to try and force Norley to fly past him. But the hard, evasive maneuver costs him too much kinetic energy. By turning, he bleeds off the crucial speed his glider needs to actually shake his pursuer. Norley predicts the path, lines up his sights, and fires. A wave of .50 caliber bullets strikes the rear fuselage. Bolenrath punches the throttle to escape, but all he hears is a massive bang. The American fire has critically damaged the mechanics, and his engine completely seizes up. He is a sitting duck. Norley unleashes a final deluge of bullets, from tail to cockpit. Bolenrath's Komet rolls out of control and nosedives into the ground. He would be the last Komet pilot shot down by a Mustang in the war. A rocket that burns out in minutes and forces its pilot to glide home is highly vulnerable against thousands of standard escort fighters. The Me-163 Komet was a marvel of aviation engineering, but its extreme speed and volatile fuel simply could not outrun the sheer numerical supremacy and endurance of the Allied forces. Sometimes, even the fastest plane in the world isn't enough to bring a heavy bomber down. So what happens when a Luftwaffe pilot decides to just ram the B-17 instead? Click the video on your screen to hear that story, and make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode.